You've written that the real test of success in a job is to idiot-proof the role and leave a thumbprint so the work runs better after you're gone. But if my ultimate purpose is to make myself replaceable, to build a system that thrives without me, how can that be my why? How do I wake up every morning excited if the end game is a system that forgets I was ever there?
Wow, that's a hell of an opening question. This is amazing. First of all, I don't mean to take over the podcast, so to speak, for a second, but I've known you guys for a hot 5 minutes now. You guys are remarkable. This is hilarious. I think what you're doing is fantastic. So, whoever just tuned in for whatever reason, even if it was just for me, these guys are amazing. I'm already like, wow, this might be one of my favorite podcasts ever, and we're one question in. So, just had to start there. The way that you do what you just asked, which is basically get up and be excited to ultimately eliminate yourself, is because of how complicated and how satisfying it is to create a system that works for itself, is truly its own ecosystem, and you can just watch from above. It's it's building a train set and then actually being able to turn the thing on and watch it go and not be like, this would be so cool, but I need to pull the locomotive the whole time. It's that. It's like the stepping away and watching the magic. And it's amazing throughout the different parts of it too, right? Like what you're referring to is basically an 11-year build of a department that basically got started from scratch the moment I walked in the door. People existed, the need for the product existed, which was making commercials for small businesses. I know a space that you all know, at least like the small business space, and how the right type of touch points in the way that you can systematically create efficiencies for small businesses to be the best version of themselves, whether that's through reviews or through commercials and creative, etc. So walk into a situation where there are 100 people already making 20,000 commercials a year for small businesses. Having to tear that apart and then rebuild it. And then I wasn't smart enough at first to see what you just asked relative to putting myself in a position where I could be replaceable. I had thought similar things in the past or previous roles about how do I leave this better than I found it? Or how do I make the next person be set up for ultimate success based off of what I've learned? Because then I felt like it was a way to become a ninja at the role while doing it. If I could come up with a playbook, make onboarding easier, all these things that for some reason I was a super nerd about. But once I realized, holy shit, this place is so big, this place being the company, and what I was working on and where I might want to go without knowing exactly what I'd want to do, how amazing would it be if I could replace myself just by stepping away? That meant the department was running super well. I could turn on the little train city and everything would light up and work perfectly, and I could just peace out. And then in addition to that, that would mean really good things for the people on the team, right? Growth, development across the board. And also, it made it really easy to think without, there's the human element of things you need to be very conscientious about so that you run a team in an immaculate way so people thrive and they believe and all that kind of good stuff. But there's also kind of the ruthless business aspect that's needed as well. Because if you put too much emphasis on people, you can make decisions that are ultimately going to be detrimental to people. Hold on to things for too long, try to stick to an old business model. All of a sudden you're like, shit, now the whole thing doesn't work and I was trying way too hard to protect whatever. So you need to look at it a little like fantasy football too. And when you put yourself in that vulnerable state of, I'm not doing this to protect my own ass. If my ultimate goal is to put myself in a position where I can walk away, and if I'm then cool as I'm looking at shit, where do we need to be in 5 years? And am I holding us back as the person making the most money with the most responsibility, etc.? It's like your quarterback on your fantasy team is super expensive and you're like, oh, I'm like, but that's the starting quarterback for the team that I love, that I grew up with. if you do that with yourself, you're not doing the game justice. So the enjoyment of being able to walk away from like, holy shit, I built this, I can turn it on and watch it, how cool to watch it. And also it gives you this freedom from a business decision perspective that allows you to not be too focused on the things that are going to hold you back from truly what's in the best. And then you can find the balance between the two. And then you feel like you're just set on a consistent basis, and it's super fun.
I guess kind of touching on the individual side, how did you process that? Like, when was that clicking moment for the emotional intelligence to when it's, I need this to run on its own without my hands in the mud?
Yeah. Great question. I fumbled through what could look like in that space for a while, where it went from walking in the door and having a very specific relationship with a guy that hired me, and just trying to make sure that he felt comfortable that I really could do the role. He approached me about the job, and so I just wanted to almost like oversell myself of like, yeah, no, I totally can. He's like, I know, dude, like I came and found you. But still I felt the need to like oversell myself. And then there's the people pleasing through the interview process, right? You want people to like you, want people to be comfortable with you. You want them to believe. A lot of people had questions about, you're leaving ESPN to come here and do this for small business. Are you really going to be comfortable with the fact that this isn't going to be Monday Night Football and Sports Center? Like, this is going to be Bob's Toyota and local cable stuff. And so through that, you just start to evolve a little bit. At my core, I've always been somebody that doesn't, my skew, even in my own emotional intelligence test that I will give myself, my self-assuredness, I would say, is one of my lowest scores, which actually helps me keep a fine balance of truly appreciating other people and never assuming that I am better than anybody else on the planet. And I have very specific reasons as to why I can think that. So it's not just a thing to say. Like, I could never put myself in somebody else's shoes in any given moment and think to myself, I could do a better job based off of everything that you've had to deal with since the moment you were born. Therefore, I should be curious and want to learn, but I should not judge and condemn. Yeah. So you mix all of those things up. And then as I started to get into the role, it was what you just asked was basically like a fight or flight type of situation where if I wasn't highly emotionally intelligent, I think I would have gotten trounced very quickly, right? You go in, fire 100 people within 6 weeks, have to get trust from them in return. Like, I could have just gone and been like, I'm the boss, this is what's happening, sorry, it sucks, right? But to do that, like, and literally let all 100 people go at the same time, how do you actually get them to then rally around what you're trying to do and trying to accomplish from there? Because if they write you off and they're just in it for themselves, or even just each other in small clusters, it has a much smaller opportunity to be wildly successful versus like, this is going to suck for all of us. And like, it wasn't my goal to come in here and do this, but here we are, and here's what we got. And to quickly be able to sell them, like, but really sell them on the fact that I'm emotionally invested in this. And as much as you think I don't give a shit because I just flew in, and you're like, you're just the dude in New York who works for corporate and you just did this big thing. As much as they may believe that, you need for them to understand like that you actually care. And then having to live through that, and then seeing also how other high level executives seem to be detached from that, like very detached from that, made me really curious. Like, why am I sitting in rooms with people that are making way more than I am when I'm making more than I ever thought I was going to make? And there's just seems to be an element of being a bit cold in some cases and being a bit more detached. And I didn't fully understand that. And I really started to question things a couple of years into my career of like, as I get to this level and as I grow from here, now that I'm at the executive level, do I really need to have like the sharp elbows? Am I not cut out for executive level leadership because I don't like being mean. I don't like being overbearing. I remember there being common phrases used like, if somebody wasn't doing what you had needed them to do, whether it was an employee or a vendor, whatever, they'd be like, oh, well, did you lean into them a little bit? Which was kind of like code for just bullying them around. And I was like, what do you think that's going to do? Like, do you think the person's gonna be like, oh, I just found like, in some cases, yeah, you need to beep your horn, or you need people to understand like what needs to happen and why, but not like that. Not like just bullying as though like all of a sudden being stern with somebody is gonna totally change. And if that is the case, if the other person only responds to action like that, that's for me to learn and then work around if I'm not comfortable. Right. And if I'm not comfortable with being like, I think some of us just have certain temperaments that like, I don't like being aggressive that way. So bit of a slow burn, but it was really like, how do I truly be able to look at people in the eye, get them to trust me, and get them to understand that I have their best interest at heart initially. And some of that took some soul searching to find out like the right way to do that versus just this is my gut instinct. Because I didn't want it to just be this feels good. I wanted it to be, I was hoping that it was going to be justified by you can also have a good business practice with a high level of emotional intelligence. And once I started to find out that that was actually true, then it just became like, oh, I got to learn as much about this as humanly possible because to me, this is the secret sauce.
You became understanding rather than to just understand somebody.
Correct. Yeah, understanding, but also understanding of how it works too, right? I could have flown through it and just been like, this works for me. The outcome is solid, but I really wanted to become a student of the emotional intelligence game, especially once I started to see case studies, right? It wasn't like, hey, empathy is great, right? There's a lot of stuff that says empathy is great, gratitude is great, like that's out there like crazy. But when I stumbled upon Harvard Business Review content that said, these are things you need, and here's business case studies that say like what the impact is to a company, to an organization, to a leader, then I was like, I'm kind of addicted to this now because this gives me, I can figure out the P&L stuff. I have the vision from a business perspective. If this unleashes more of who I naturally, how I feel most naturally comfortable as a leader, and does so in a way that's going to gravitate me more towards Harvard Business School thinking, then 1,000% I'm in.
As a leader, when your voice does carry that much weight on your team and trying to get people to rally behind you, you said that one of your frameworks is knowing that they're going to go home and have a conversation with their family.
Yep.
And they're going to get asked, how was your day today?
Yep.
And what you say to them and how you treat them impacts that decision. For someone who's just in that entry role, maybe lower level, how can they carry that same philosophy when their voice doesn't carry as much weight as an executive?
It's a brilliant question. If you just understand that even the little things that you do can still have that kind of impact, right? You just started at a company, based off of how you are even saying good morning to the people around you. There was a guy at my company named Danny who was an intern, one of the interns that got like the golden ticket at the end of the internship. We'd love to keep you around full time. And it was really his temperament, right? Like he just had this brilliant temper. He could obviously do the job. Like he had the right background. He was already studying the right things. That all made sense. But his temperament was so contagious that people just liked having him around. And that will impact, even if you don't sit down and you're like, hey, I've got this great story about Danny today. When you're around those kinds of people, it just has an impact on your day, right? And even if it's the person, this is a real example, my friend Terrence, who sat across from Danny. And I know that when Terrence would have difficult days, just the ability to talk about the Knicks with Danny while grabbing a cup of coffee in the afternoon, like lightens the mood. So when your temperament is solid and you're like, wow, that's just good people. I like to be around good people. Like most people are going to say that. if your temperament is solid, if you're reliable, right? Literally taking stress off of other people's plates because you're like, Danny's solid. I don't have to worry about that at dinner tonight. Like, I know Danny is on it. Those things will roll up. So yes, the guy with the title who can be the cool boss and help people feel more comfortable, but also Danny, the guy that's been there for a hot second after his internship, simply because of his demeanor, because he's reliable, because it's going to actually think of the impact when you're solid and you're a good person, when people will choose to have conversation about you behind your back for good reason. Danny's doing a great job, right? Yeah, Danny's super cool. Those are people that are literally emoting positivity because of things that you have done. So title has a huge impact, obviously, like bosses carry more water. But don't forget, you can literally, when they say you can brighten somebody's day, that usually you think of like, oh, I gave you something and it was, no, you can actually brighten somebody's day just by like being a good person, having your shit together. And then all of a sudden people are going to be like, oh, that, like, love that dude, doing a great job. And even if it's just that, that's like 15 seconds of positivity that can just have a snowball impact so that you go home at the end of the day and you're like, yeah, today was a good day.
Yeah. I mean, I think just going off that, how, like, when you go home internally at night, whether it's you just, crushed Q4 earnings or you're completely in the red, how do you separate to where you're still going to be a good husband, a good father, and a good person? So when you wake up at 4 a.m. the next day, you can choose to be in a good mood. It's just as easy to choose a good mood as a bad mood.
Yeah.
So I guess, what is your approach on that, and how are you able to separate?
It's hard. It took me a while to figure out what the best recipe was. There's two things. One is, it's funny, I'm going to give a very corporate answer to a very like non-corporate question. I mean, I know you're kind of like, it's basically the overlap. Walking in the door, what is the superordinate goal? Superordinate goal being like what is like the highest level goal across all of your general goals. Walking the door, the superordinate goal on any given night is good vibes in the house and basically a full run through of how everyone's doing, what's coming up, and how you can be helpful. Includes yourself. But if the superordinate goal, once you walk in the house, truly is that, how is this collective community, being the family unit, feeling about what's going on and where we're going? If I walk in and I'm like, I had a shit day and I feel justified carrying this into the house, I'm crapping all over my own superordinate goal. I'm literally pulling myself backwards, right? I know that it's very easy, and we will go through phases, and I definitely did this myself, where it almost feels appropriate to carry that burden into your home, right? This is dragging on me. I need my safe space at home to be able to talk about this and feel this way. Those things are not inaccurate, and it's not unfair, but it should not be overbearing. Like, again, what is the superordinate? Like, walking in the home, I think the easiest way for especially any young professional that's trying to like wrap their head around, how do I sort these things together? You're going to have your broader goals and your broader purposes. You have multiple purposes, in my humble opinion. When you walk in the home, your broader goal is to just like have a good home, right? And have a good home, I mean, I don't mean just the walls, like what's the vibe in the house? And if you're able to put your own specific thoughts, not aside, but understand how they mix with the rest of it, right? If my daughter's super stoked about something that happened in our class, and I don't get to unlocking that nugget from her because I walk in the house and I'm like, fuck Q4 earnings or whatever the thing may be, then I'm missing out on refueling myself, let alone not giving her an opportunity to say, hey, this is what was dope about my day. So superordinate goal sounds like way more technical than it actually is, but it's this concept of like what truly is the desired outcome in the bubbles that you have in life. And yes, that allows you to also understand that you can have a safe space to go into vent as well. But you need to be cognizant of what is going to be good for everybody at the end of whatever that is. Dinner at the end of the day, whatever you're doing on a Saturday, those types of things. And it actually helps with the balance. I think it allows you to be more present too. So if you're cognizant of what is truly in everyone's best interest, you can be selfless without completely putting yourself to the side, because your own good outcome is tied to what that superordinate goal is as well.
When you're leading the team or leading their family when you come home at the end of the night, and a mistake does happen, because not every day can be a great 100% day.
Yeah.
You said to own your mistakes, but even take more than your share of the blame when they do happen. But if a leader takes the blame,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't it make it harder for the team to actually learn and improve what went wrong? Like, how do you decide when to take the hit and say, okay, this was my fault,
Yep.
and when to hold the others around you accountable?
I actually think they're one and the same, right? Like, this is such a smart question, because I think that this can get misconstrued a lot, where those two are completely separate. I don't think that that's the case. My blame that I could take on myself could be from a systems or process perspective. And that is not to say that it's my job then to fix it potentially. But if I can own the fact that the system was set up for this thing to have happened, it doesn't mean that the person then had zero responsibility in what the outcome was. In a lot of cases, they're going to actually listen a lot more if they hear me say something and they're like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't almost sound fair to him. Or I will get a better sense too as to how well things need to be set up so that those things don't happen, based off of the level of how much the person cares on the other side. I also need to, I think it's a must to start with, where are there actual critical, like specific things that I can hold myself accountable for? Because if I'm trying to, even if it's like, how the hell did you miss that, right? There's a distinct possibility that you 1,000% should have caught that. But if I just go straight for that, and if there's something on my side that I'm overlooking just to make that point, I'm screwing up. Because it's like there's how everything works as an ecosystem, and then there's elements of potential flaw within that. The ecosystem is never going to be perfect. When things go wrong, it's my ability to look at the ecosystem, which I own, start there, and then I can even have a more specific conversation to hold somebody accountable. Be like, look, I know the system is not perfect for X, Y, and Z reasons, but that doesn't mean that blank should not have happened, right? And that can be way more powerful than just blank should not have happened. Because then if the other person is like, well, shit, what about X, Y, Z in the system? I'm losing a little bit of credibility. And it's so easy for these things to happen when things are moving super fast in a corporate space. And then a year goes by and you have all of these like little places where you might have been off, where you could have made the whole ecosystem better, and have people be like, wow, the ecosystem has gotten stronger, therefore I need to get stronger as well. So it's a really fine balance. And I have rarely, I thought one thought in my head relative to like, oh, there was a moment where I said this and I blamed myself and I shouldn't. Off the top of my head, I think of one story, but I was even right in that story to have blamed myself. And if you do that consistently, you're never going to be in a position where you're not making things better for everybody. And that's super important, and that can hold the people on your team that much more accountable at the end of the day too.
Yeah, and I think, kind of the root thing I'm picking up on is transparency, credibility, and accountability.
Yep.
Kind of like we talked about briefly at the start.
Yeah.
Like the more transparent you are and true to yourself, the team's going to rise. All boats rise with the rising tide.
Mm-hmm.
But I think kind of transitioning into, if I could grab the paper, accountability, and it goes hand in hand with creativity as well.
Mhm.
And you never, or I'm going to say not you never, but become a creator in your 40s. And
Mhm.
it's kind of just something that, gradually happened with, going to Sweet Green and showing your awesome sneaker collection, which I'm also a huge fan. I have
I
tons of
appreciate
shoes.
this, guys.
Yes. Thank you. I thought about wearing my Volts.
Oh, sick.
Yes,
Yeah.
neon yellow. My favorite shoe ever. I wore it to my 8th grade graduation.
Wow. Good for
It's
you.
going to date me a little bit, but how did you kind of muster up you're accountable, and if I could get the question out, I guess I'll tie it back into students. So I think, especially in our early development as young professionals,
Mhm.
creativity can kind of look frowned upon
Mm.
by corporate world.
Yep.
So I mean, like, if we don't have a resume full of accomplishments yet, like, what really should we record? Should it be our daily life as a student,
Yep.
or like, what is the right stage? Even though there is no right stage to begin. Sorry,
Yeah.
that was long-winded.
No, I got it. I mean, one thing I'll say at the beginning of your question is like the transparency that you're bringing in accountability, like the transparency and just like the elements that kind of fully wrap themselves around what it means to be a good leader and just to have like awareness in your presence. And there's part of it that's like owning it in a way that just feels good, right? So there's these words that we're using because they're accurate descriptions, but at the same time too, it just comes back to like what feels good as a human being. And luckily, I just didn't know any better other than the way that I was acting. Was like, I need to be transparent across the board because this is super overwhelming. And if I try to do anything else, I feel like I'm just going to be shoving stuff underneath the rug, and that's going to lead to a train wreck. So this is kind of what you get. And so there's an element too of just what feels good for the soul, and that's not to be overlooked, which kind of helps answer your question too about like what's the right amount of authenticity to lend in there. Because I think that that's kind of at the core of it, right? Like, how do you be your authentic self without pushing it too far, doing anything that's going to be like too quote unquote awkward, and at the same time not shoving yourself in a box, right? Like, that's kind of it. Authenticity has a few very specific variables because I've literally studied authenticity and the kind of scientific breakdown of what goes into that as well. Two geniuses came up with this like overarching way to look at authenticity so that you could truly own it but have a measuring stick to it, right? It sounds like this variable where there is no, well, everyone's authentic in their own way, but there are ways to become authentic in a very sincere way. One of the most critical components of that is something called unbiased processing. And that is being able to look at both what you do well and your flaws without blame and without guilt. If you can look at both your flaws and your strengths without blame or guilt, incredibly powerful. Like, talk about putting yourself in a position where you can care so much and not give a fuck at the same time. Like, you almost become undefeatable. Like, I know all my flaws super well at this point. Like, what I just described is one of the reasons why I've become as comfortable as I have become, is because and especially in the corporate space, was like, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to try to walk into a meeting and be like, cool, I've got it all on lockdown, right? Like, I know my flaws. That allowed me to genuinely be more authentic. So when it comes to telling your own story, when it comes to being comfortable in that weird space in between, I still want to make sure that the kid inside me doesn't go away. And I want to tell my stories, and I want my fun, big, weird ideas to come to life and like all this stuff. If you can do the unbiased processing piece and gut check that every once in a while, you're probably going to be okay. On top of that, two questions that I think are just table stakes, and based off of how well you've done your research, these will probably be familiar. Are my intentions good? Like, what are you really thinking the outcome's going to be here? For real though, right? Like, sometimes you'd be like, oh, well, I think that this will be, but in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I'm gonna fucking blast this person, right? Yeah, if I say this or I do this thing, are your intentions really good? And are you trying hard for the right reasons? If you can answer those two questions in a way that makes you feel comfortable, then go for it. Right? I have a lot of conversations with people that are like, how do I try, even just when they're trying to network or they're trying to get themselves more visible to recruiters, I'm like, why are you not making content about the things that you believe in, the things you've seen? People feel that usually like they don't have enough experience, or like, why them, or to the question you asked. But if I was working at Baskin Robbins and I was there for like 2 summers, 5 things I learned about customer service working at Baskin Robbins over the past 2 summers. I always thought it was interesting that these 3 flavors went first. Here's what I learned about them and why. Like that kind of stuff. I think it sounds cliche. Your curiosity is going to lead you in the right direction. I always wondered why people who commute in from 50 miles away are potentially less happy than blah, 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 blah. Follow your curiosity. Do some unbiased processing. Everybody's got their weird shit and their flaws and their strengths. If you can look at them without denial or blame, you're bulletproof, because you're going to grow in time. You're not supposed to be perfect at any moment. And, are your intentions good and are your efforts solid? And then I don't think you can go wrong.
From the protein bar reviews to having your book coming out in exactly 364 days to having hundreds of pages of advice and countless talks with a TED Talk on the horizon. So much of your perspective is already out in the world. What is the one question you haven't been asked yet, and how would you answer it?
Such a good question. Oh, man. My brain goes between a few different things. One is like, I thought of What's Your Take? Have you guys seen that show? Yeah, brilliant. This guy Kareem does his show on the subway, right? And he just says to people, and I would love to answer that question. The way that I got there was, I don't think anybody's asked me about my perspective on like capitalism as a whole and how to do a better job with it. It's kind of inherent in a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. And here's where I go there. It's like, that was a super hard question. An amazing one. And so this is how I'm wrapping it around. It made me think of Subway Takes. It made me think of what my take would be on that show, which leads me to a topic that I don't get into too often. I've talked openly about my salary. And I've gotten some, comments here and there. You see people that are sometimes like, oh, nice if you're, rich, or when people are like, oh, you're rich. I'm like, and for a while, I did struggle with, I'm a older white male in a suit who's been super fortunate throughout the course of his life simply by being born the way that I am, and all the other variables that just make it arguably easier to go on a path to be successful, just based off of how fucking crazy the world is and the general chances of who you are and where you were raised and how you're raised of the 8 billion people on the planet. And something I'm becoming more comfortable with now, and a question that I don't think I've been asked yet, is how do you feel about your place kind of like relative to the broader conversation about what are you trying to build and why? And what does success look like that kind of points in the direction of like, what are you trying to build wealth-wise and why? Because I'm not looking to, like, there's some other people in the space who I aspire to be like from an impact perspective, but I have zero desire to be like from a wealth perspective, if that makes any sense, right? There's people that have, and I say this with all due love and respect, people that have built such empires that they can have like, their own basically version of like some sort of entertainment event where like a lot of people will come into town and like go to almost this conference based around this one person. Or they'll have these like super big companies. And even Scott Galloway, I don't know if you know who Scott Galloway is. I heard him talking the other day about how he makes like about $35 million a year. And I was like, holy shit, I had no idea. And I do well. I do better than I probably would have fathomed, and I'm comfortable. And I actually put this into ChatGPT the other day. I was just curious because of this topic that you didn't ask me about, but you kind of asked me about. And if I was like, tell me where I would rank as a professional athlete relative to my compensation if like this is what I've made on average over the past 4 years. And they were like, you'd be league minimum in these 3 leagues. You would be below the cut in this league. I think it was the NFL. For MLS, you'd be like not a superstar, but you'd be here. And then it made me think, because I have gotten a decent amount of shit, and I've been very cautious about like pushing back in the comments or doing things, most of which because I'm just quiet by nature, but also when I was doing that with the job at the same time, like I didn't want to like really stir the pot. Now I kind of want to stir the pot a little bit more in some cases. It's almost waiting for that to pop back up again, where there are people like, oh, this guy, like one of those types of comments would be like, listen, what the fuck? Like, in my best case scenario, I'm like a left-handed reliever that has like 4 or 5 really good years. You're really going to shit on me for like trying to chase that down just because I've been doing so in an office? No. Like, come on. I've been working my ass off, and people watching in real time. And it's not to justify the wealth inadequacies in this world, or especially in our country, but like, in the grand scheme of things, there's like the dude that lives on the other side, like based on where we are right now, we're super close to my house. I live next to I live in a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, New York. You stop it there and it sounds like, holy shit, like I live a block away from one of the most polluted bodies of water in North America underneath the subway. So like there's always those things about the blocks and like the different places. So the question that I haven't been asked is like, where do you stand on, I guess, how you can justify what you're trying to build and being able to do brand deals and like do other things you're trying to build. And look, I would love to be able to be in a position where this is so funny because I'm answering a question that didn't really exist. I would love to be in a position where I'm helping especially your generation wrap their heads around what it takes to be successful in corporate America, so that anything that you want to change about it, that you can. One of my biggest concerns is that there's so much content around why you should, like, all of this shit that's like, work is where the Wi-Fi, there's like all of these like little phrases by some creators that I'm like, all you're doing is stirring the pot and making, like, giving people something to point to, be like, yeah, this is why it sucks. But then what are you going to, like, then how do we fix this? Right? So the opportunity to put super smart people like yourselves in a position to be more comfortable and confident in what they're doing and building, so that they can then go and be like, you know what? Minimum wage should be $45 an hour starting tomorrow, because I run this company and this is what we're doing. And here's how we're going to make that work so that our EBITDA doesn't get super fucked up while we're doing that. Or here's what we're going to do with our healthcare, or here's what we're going to do from an environmental policy perspective. Like, that's what I would like to try to pass along. So the question that I don't get asked, I guess, is, like, how do I justify what I'm trying to build and how I can do these things and feel comfortable, like, going and eating a shitload of takeout sushi, knowing that that's not like a super cheap way to eat and blah, blah, blah. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, come on. Like, and also, I would really love to pay forward the opportunity for others to feel so comfortable and confident in who they are and what they bring to the table that that they really have a greater opportunity to create much bigger change than I've ever touched, and do so for the right reasons.
I think we're all fighting for our second contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Well, how wonderful. You guys are great.